The question often comes up, is MDMA a psychedelic? And it's a really good question because in some ways I do think it is, and in other ways I would say not so much. So let's go ahead and talk about that and break it down a little bit more. The term psychedelic means mind manifesting or soul manifesting, and if you just kind of took the literal definition of the word psychedelic, I do think that MDMA would fit the bill. This is because MDMA taken, or at least MDMA taken in a therapeutic kind of context or container, gives the user an expanded emotional range, access to insights or parts of their psyche that, they weren't really aware of before, and an increased capacity for emotionally processing, particularly traumatic memories. So it does seem that MDMA would fit the bill from that kind of literal perspective of the term, psychedelic. On the flip side, when we think of psychedelics, most people think of classical psychedelics, which include substances like psilocybin, LSD or acid, NN-dimethyltryptamine, as well as mescaline. And these substances tend to cause a much more profound sense of distortion in the way that we perceive the world, either visually, through sound. It tends to really kind of disintegrate things, break it down, and particularly psilocybin now is being associated with mystical types of experiences, and where there's a really kind of this loss of sense of self. And this doesn't really happen with MDMA. You don't get this profound breakdown in the way you perceive the world or real ego loss. This is probably because MDMA shares a chemical structure or a chemical backbone with amphetamine. And this means that mechanistically, it kind of mimics an amphetamine and releases neurotransmitters. Now, MDMA is different than regular amphetamines because MDMA tends to release serotonin primarily, whereas regular amphetamines release norepinephrine and dopamine. So different neurotransmitters released, but that amphetamine-ish aspect of releasing neurotransmitters is preserved. Now, what does this do as far as the experience? It tends to preserve that sense of self, so the person retains knowing who they are and where they are, but it really pushes the emotional defense mechanisms or the kind of fear mechanisms aside, and this allows a lot of repressed material to come up and be processed in a healthy and therapeutic way such that it doesn't kind of come back again. So it's interesting in that, yes, in some ways MDMA is emotionally a psychedelic. However, it tends to have this kind of euphoric and mood uplifting effect characteristic of amphetamine, and primarily reduces fear mechanisms rather than dials down the sense of self like a classical psychedelic like psilocybin might.